listeners. My name is Kim C. I teach University Fiction Workshop, and I am the one-woman host of this lecture-style Stephen King book podcast called The Year of Underrated Stephen King. This book podcast celebrates the wonderful writing of Stephen King and my personal reading journey that began in the post-grad school summer of 2013 when I picked up my very first Stephen King title, Full Dark No Stars, and since then I have not stopped reading, discussing, and praising Stephen King's work for the last 12 years straight. And for the last 5 years straight, I have been one of, if not the only, solo female Stephen King podcaster on the long walk of King's creative work, making friends, processing King's art, and assisting others on their King journey to hopefully find some deeper depths within their reader experiences. Today, lovely people, oh wow, today, do I have an episode to end all episodes? Do I have the golden ticket? Why, yes, listeners. Yes, I do. Friends, it is with great pride and exhilaration that I'm finally able to reveal my mystery surprise guest is none other than Mr. Neil McRobert from Talking Scared. Mr. Neil McRobert first joined me on the show a few years back for episode 124, a constant reader interview that revealed Neil's personal history with King's writing. And a few weeks ago, Neil returned to the Year of Underrated Stephen King to absolutely blow the roof off the place with his thoughts on a topic I love to explore, the women of Stephen King. If you jump to episode 119, 96, and 64, you can listen to where the women of Stephen King are at the forefront. This is a segment I'm really passionate about, as it's asking constant readers, who are your favorite Stephen King females, and why are they your favorites? What do they bring to your reading journey, and what makes them linger in your mind after the story is finished? I love to learn which King females out there deserve greater spotlight, who needs a sequel or prequel, or simply more time on the page, and most importantly, is there truth in King's fiction writing of women? Is there truth about the feminine, the body, the mind, the spirit, the total package of the female experience from the incredibly skillful hand of a fiction writer who also happens to be a cisgender American male? It is a real magical area to explore, and dear ones, when you get Neil McRobert on the Stephen King racetrack and you wave that checkered flag, my goodness, prepare to be amazed. My flabbers were so gasted that after recording with Neil, I emailed him to sort of ask him, as well as myself, did that really happen? Did it? Because it was so awesome, I think my brain may have liquefied to a small extent. For this exploration with Neil and the women of Stephen King, this conversation really does cater to those who have spent some time with Stephen King females other than Miss Carrie White. It's highly recommended you have an idea about what goes down in the novels of Lacey Story, Dolores Claiborne, Gerald's Game, Bag of Bones, as well as even more expansive constant reader advanced levels for the novellas Big Driver, Hearts in Atlantis, and Low Men in Yellow Coats. There are definitely no super explicit spoilers in this investigation, so feel free to proceed if you're not familiar with those titles, because I have zero doubt you're going to get a lot out of this conversation, no matter what. Lovies, I am dead serious when I say this might be one of the most significant, important, and wonderful episodes we've ever done. There's just something about it. Something so beyond, so ineffable, I can't really explain it, but here's how I know, deep down, it's a cut above. So never in my 5 years of solo podcasting have I ever thought or wanted Mr. Stephen King to hear any episode of my show. He's a busy man. There are lots of great podcasts out there, Neil's being one of them. I am a small but mighty little pod with a lot of passion, but never did I feel there could ever be an episode to bother Mr. King with until now. If somehow, some way, King came across this episode number 150, I would enjoy that greatly. It really would be a mighty thing indeed. All right, listeners, I shan't delay any further. Let us now dive in with returning guest, Mr. Neil McRobert from Talking Scared, and listen to his thoughts on the women of Stephen King. All right, ladies and gentlemen, my heart is just leaping out of my chest with excitement and joy to welcome back my friend, Mr. Neil McRobert from Talking Scared. Welcome back to the year of underrated Stephen King, Neil.
Hello, Kim. You're very kind. I basically forced my way onto your podcast by publicly just begging if I could come back on. So thanks for having me.
What a true honor to have you manhandle your way back here. I love it.
Yeah. But blame Jonathan Jans because I listened to your conversation with Jonathan, who is just the nicest person in the Western Hemisphere, and it made me really want to come and talk Stephen King again with you. So here I am. Blame him.
Oh, I will. I will thank him profusely. What an angel. I'm so glad that you could hear the magic that he put forth because he's a really special person. You are equally one of my favorite people in the world to talk Stephen King with. So it's a real pleasure to have you back. And I wanted to get our gears greased with asking you about Talking Scared and your 2025. How are things? How's everything going?
Yeah, it's going well. We're in a really weird period right now. So for those who don't know, I speak to a different horror author every week. And I've also introduced this other arc called Off Book, where I speak to film directors or podcasters or people who do things in the horror space that aren't necessarily writing books. So there's a lot to do. I have to read a book every week for the podcast and stuff. And in June, my wife is turning 40. So we have like a big summer of kind of plans, which means that I've had to do all of the work for that early. So I'm reading like 3 books. It's just nuts at the minute. I'm recording like all my rigor and all of my scheduling's gone all over the place. So it's crazy, but it's still good. And I've got some good guests coming up, and it's I think I'm going to get Joe Hill on the show this year, which would be cool if it happens. So it's good. Yeah.
I'm so glad. Happy early birthday to your lady. We love birthdays around here and vacations attached to them. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
But yes, I want to launch us into a segment I've had floating around on the show for a couple of years. It's one of my favorite Stephen King topics. I think there's a lot to say. There's a lot to dig into. Neil has been so gracious to shed some light, share some of his thoughts on the women of Stephen King. My first question for Neil is asking him who are his top 5 females in the Stephen King universe. He, of course, has free reign to add more, but top 5 to start us off.
Why wouldn't you get a white British middle-aged man to talk about? I'm not sure if right. So I got a bit nervous about this, if I'm honest, because some of my favorite memories of King females are from some of the books in which he's quite problematic. Might be too strong a word, problematic, but I think he's got much better at writing women as he's gone along, So like Susan from Salem's Lot has a real solid place in my heart, but she's kind of a two-dimensional character. I'm not a massive fan of Franny for that reason. I mean, people love Franny, and I've never liked Franny's character because I feel she's a bit of a doormat, a bit of a passive character. But a lot of my early loves, I think, are not his greatest sort of performances in writing women. So I've gone and sat down and thought, like, who are the ones who I think are a mix of both brilliant writing and characters that I enjoy spending time with? Because a few of these are not great people. But, right, my top 5. So I have one who is head and shoulders out in front, the number 1 character. And I have another 4 who are all on the same level of pedestal. So we'll do those 4 too. So first up, Annie Wilkes. And I've just listened to your countdown of your top 15 King novels,
Yeah.
and you had a hard time with Misery, and I'm really confused by that because I think Annie Wilkes is a delight.
Oh
What
dear.
what what have you got against poor Annie Wilkes?
Oh, Neil. Well, I don't know. Just a few things that come to mind. I really think that she might be that witch in the woods. She's that dark fairy tale witch in there who is there to punish a very poor behaving Paul Sheldon. And that's on the first level. And then it's the torture, it's the drugging, it's the maiming, it's the amputation, the psychological warfare. I don't know. Pick a card.
I love Annie Wilkes.
I'm glad.
I kind of like Annie Wilkes. That's the thing. All right, she's killed quite a lot of babies. That that is an issue. I will admit that the baby murder in her previous life is an issue. But I really think that Paul Sheldon is an awful human being.
He's not great.
And it's funny because when I spoke to King, I wanted to ask him this about whether his opinion on Paul has changed as King has got over his own neuroses about writing horror and being pigeonholed. Because I think King kind of betrays himself to a degree in Paul Sheldon. It was just awful. And every time I read it, I like Annie more and like Paul less. But yeah, Annie's just one of King's greatest villains, without a doubt.
Truly.
But like just amazing, truly terrifying. Like, yeah, I think possibly his most frightening villain because of, all right, Big Jim Rennie has power over an entire town. Pennywise has power over an entire town and beyond, and Flag has power over all of King's dominion. But in that one room, which for the benefit of that book is the world, Annie is a totalitarian god. I mean, there's something in Misery, isn't there, about how it's been a while since I've read. Doesn't he have some dream where he sees her as a god?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
Annie is a god or something like that. Something like that. I God, it's a while since I read it. But yeah, she's a godhead and she's terrifying because she believes she's right. And they're always the scariest villains, people who believe that they are on the side of the angels when they're on the side of the devils. And I just think she's a wonderful, utterly unique creation. There's no one else like her in horror. No one I mean, I know that book riffs on John Fowles' The Collector, but it's so much more frightening and Annie's more likable than the character in The Collector. I just think she's wonderful. I think she's just this force of horror nature.
She's wonderful to pick apart for sure. You've got what you mentioned, that dark goddess stuff in there, the destroyer goddess. You also have the dark mother looking at archetypes because she is this murdering nurse who's trying to nurture and nurse Paul back to health, but in her own skewed reality, which is truly unhinged.
Yeah, she's a masterpiece. I would potentially argue she's King's greatest character. I'd need to think about that, which is weird because she's not my number one favorite female. But I think from a craft sense or just pure effectiveness, I think she may be his best character, but she's not my favorite. Next, I have this week, right? I'll do the obvious one first. I think everyone would expect to be on my list for good reason. That's Bevy Marsh from It.
Yay!
I think you'd be loath to find a ranking of top 5 King females that didn't have Beverly Marsh on it for good reason. Because she's from my favorite book and she's the heart and soul of my favorite book. We've talked before when I came on last time about what a vile disservice I think the movies did to her in making her a kind of damsel in distress when she's the absolute opposite. She's the flame around which they all congregate, and she's braver than any of them. She overcomes more than any of them. Because the thing about Bevy is she's not just fighting it, she's fighting misogyny in this town as well. The other losers clubs are, yeah, all right, they're fighting a pan-dimensional monster and they're fighting bullies, but there isn't that awful sexual component to it. So Bevy has to overcome so much more. But like, obviously, there's the stuff with her father, which what do you think about this, right? Because when we did the deep dive into it on my show, it dawned on me that the book never makes it explicit that her father is abusing her or at least seeing her in like a sexual way. But I think it's obvious that he is. Did you take from that as well?
I leaned really, really closely to the fact that we should not assume. We should not assume in the text. So I said he was on the cusp. It was going to happen, I think, in time. But I believe King, up until the most controversial scene, as you know, I think sexuality is not really explored in strong detail for the majority of the book. Everybody is around that year of 10, 11 years old. We don't have explicit sexuality. Mm-hmm. We don't have developing body parts. Beverly never looks at her body in a way that indicates blossoming womanhood outside of her menstruation, which I believe the films really tackle, not so much the novel. So I think no, actually, which I know a lot of people who love Beverly, they insert that like, oh, she's already a victim. I don't think so. I think it was on the horizon.
That's the best way to put it. It is going to happen, because that thing about I worry about you, Bevy, and all of that sort of stuff. But she's so sexualized in that book by the narrative point of view in parts. I think that's not because King is doing something untoward. I think he's making a point about it. But there's scenes with the bullies, with Bowers and stuff, where there's a kind of implication of rape and things like that. And then, so the point I'm making is I think Bevy overcomes so much more than her peers in that book and never becomes a victim. Is always somebody who is leading the charge. My heart will always be with Ben Hanscom, always. I am Ben, Ben is I, we are all together. I'm not the world's biggest fan of Bill, because I think as a kid I wouldn't have liked him. But Bevy, she's just the heart and soul of that book. And when you stop being a young... I mean, I read it the first time I was 13, and I did that thing where as a kid you only want to know about, the boys, and I kind of dismissed her. And going back, every time I read it as an adult, she comes more and more to the foreground. And King's not... That's not accidental, like the fact that she's the best shot, for example, in an incredibly boy-like thing to be good at, and like he puts her right at the front of that group as like every bit as brave, if not more brave, if not as tough, more tough than the rest of them. I just think she's wonderful. I just think like I would go to battle for Bevy, but she'd be there fighting before I got there. She's amazing.
Oh, I love that, Neil. That's so heartwarming to hear. I think that she's a real treasure. I love Beverly. Mm-hmm. And I think as a woman, though, I'm always really curious. This is probably one of the most things I'm curious about Bev, is she goes into the textile industry. And as a lady who also loves clothes, I'm like, I wish King would have given us little morsels of why does she like clothes. I know her blouse fails her many times in the novel. Her blouse flies open, so maybe she just wanted to design more effective clothing for herself. But I always want to know Bev more as a woman, which I know that's not really what the heart of the novel is about. But I do love the fact that what you mentioned about her overcoming so much more than everyone else, and that's very true.
That scene with Tom, with a awful boorish husband at the start of the adult section, is fan. I mean, it goes on a long time, that scene, and she's trapped in this house with this man who's becoming more and more and more violent, and it reached the point where you think, oh my god, he might kill her here. And it's such a powerhouse introduction of the character, and then it all makes sense when you see what she's been through as a child. I think she may be the character, her and Mike Hanlon, because I love Mike as well, but I think they are the two characters whose adult iteration feels the most connected to and makes the most sense as a result of the childhood iteration. Who they turn out to be is exactly who they would be having lived the life they've lived. And I think she's wonderful. Do you want me to continue?
You can do whatever you like, good sir. I'm with you on the Mike Hanlon. He has now become my favorite. I feel he is like an Old Testament prophet with the heavy burden he has to bear. And I adore what King does with Mike Hanlon. But I love that you have connected Bev and Mike's childhood. I've never heard that. So that's really rich. That's very nourishing to me, Neil. I love that.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think they just make sense. They're just wonderful. But I can't really ever speak analytically about it because that book is written on my heart. So its flaws I overlook. its strengths I overplay, so I cannot have any kind of objective conversation. There's no point trying with me. It's rare I say anything cogent about it. I normally just try and spew my emotions out. Moving on, though, so I think Annie Wilkes and Bevy Marsh are kind of Route One answers. Two answers that I think are perhaps a bit more niche, and I love them both dearly. Well, the first, how do you feel about the book Lisa's Story?
I love it. I do.
Right.
I love it because it's a complicated answer. It's a complex book.
Mm-hmm.
I love the puzzling nature of the book. I love it the way someone would enjoy a tricky riddle or something difficult to get through, and then you master it on the other end and you feel like you've achieved something. That's how I feel about Lisa's Story. I feel like I'm in college again. This is hard. I'm forced to do it. So we might as well make the best of it and get as much out of it as possible. So I do enjoy it for its strangeness.
So I have a strange relationship with that book. It's now one of my favorite King novels. I think it's one of his most sophisticated novels. That and Doomakey are the two that I really went back and changed my opinion 180 on. The first time I read Lisa's Story, all the Boole stuff and the Booyah Moon and all the marriage talk just drove me mad. And I also got really annoyed. We kept seeing this scene of the attempted assassination and the thing with the shovel from different perspectives, and we examined it from every direction. I was like, I get it, get with it. Side note, I had a job that I hated, and I remember reading Lisa's Story on my lunch hour in a coffee shop. And when I found out about Scott Langdon's childhood and how heartbreaking what goes on is, I was so upset that I just went home and never went back to that job ever. I just quit and went home. I was like, well, life's too short. I'm not going back to this job.
Whoa!
Yeah, but the reason I bring up Lisa's Story is my pick for the female character I love is not Lisa. Although I do think Lisa is wonderful the more I found out about Tabitha King, because she does seem to be just an avatar of Tabitha King. And, that kind of quite tough, no-nonsense woman, I just think is brilliant. But I absolutely love Amanda Derbyshire, however you say her surname. So Lisa's older sister, Amanda Bunny. I love her because she comes good at the most opportune time, and she's such a vulnerable victim for so much of the story. She's almost often a catatonic non-character, but she's so integral, and she has this bond with her brother-in-law, with Scott, which is deeper in many ways than Scott even has with Lisa. And right at the end, I'm a sucker for an underdog coming good, and Manda is the ultimate underdog coming good, because at the end she saves her little sister at a crucial moment from a very corporeal, real threat. And I remember just like wanting to punch the air. And I think King has often written, I mean, I have very clearly vocalized problems with Holly Gibney because I don't feel the neurodiversity is done well. I just think I think King writes her as neurodiverse or neurodivergent when it suits the story. And then when it doesn't, she's a perfectly functioning person with no barriers to overcome. And then we're back to her by having issues, and it doesn't feel consistent. Whereas with Manda, I feel he writes somebody who's got deep-seated mental health problems, and it's completely consistent, and he still finds a way to make her into a hero. And I think that is wonderful.
Oh my gosh, Neil, if I could high five you and hug you, I am blown away by that answer. That is such a deep cut. It's such a rare First of all, I will die on the hill of more people reading Lisa's Story. It is a fascinatingly incredible book, and not a lot of people finish it. They don't like it. They don't have nice things to say. And you reached in and grabbed an obscure character who a lot of people write off because she's encircled in mental health. She's catatonic. She's absolutely swallowed by madness a large majority of the book. And I think I have a feeling of writing off Amanda Bunny. And so this is huge, Neil. This is fascinating. I love it.
Yeah, I think she's great. I'm a sucker for the underdog coming good. And it's that great thing where, like, who's going to ride into rescue in the final moments? Who's going to turn up with a gun, at the back door? Who is it? And it's the most, I won't say weakest. That's too much of a dismissal. It's the most vulnerable character in the book who summons herself and makes a stand. That thing that all true king heroes do, they make a stand. And she stands up for her little sister, and she comes after years and years of Lisi having to subjugate her own life to care for Manda and rush to her, and when she most needs her big sister, there she is. I think it's just really touching.
I love this. So I'm going to be thinking about this at like 2 a.m. tomorrow, Neil. This is so huge because she is, oh, wow. I've never thought about her that way, but you're so right. And wow, this is huge. Fully nerding out on this. This will be, wow. Okay. I don't want to derail on my amazement, but this was a good one.
Well, the next one may be just as much a sort of deep cut, and I'm not sure you've read the book, actually, because I think I heard you telling Jonathan you still had some to read. Have you read Hearts in Atlantis?
I have. Yep. We're
You
good.
have?
Yes.
Excellent, right. So Hearts in Atlantis is one of those deep cut King novels that I think more people should read. It's one of my favorite King books. That and From a Buick 8 are the books that I think are probably least known. If you had to give if you had to come up with a thing that no one else had read, I'd say one of those two. And I love it because I'm a sucker for nostalgia. I'm a sucker for like the Flower Power era, the Ashbury Heights era, all of that stuff. And Carol Gerber, the connective tissue between the stories in this. But for those who don't know, I mean, you probably do, but Hearts Like Atlantis is a collection of 5 stories of different lengths, all linked in some way by the Vietnam War. But if you want a real spinal connective structure that runs through them all, it's Carol Gerber. My favorite movie is Forrest Gump, which I say with some chagrin because having watched it again, I realize how much stuff there is in Forrest Gump that could raise eyebrows in contemporary attitudes. But I love it, and I'm not going to apologize for loving it. It's my favorite film because I think the film is a mythology of America, and I love anything. I love the myth of America, right? And it'll come back, people. Trust me. Hearts Like Atlantis does the same thing. It's the dark twin to Forrest Gump. It's the dark myth of America. And Carol, in many ways, is the Jenny character. She's for Bobby, the little boy who most people think of as, I think, the main character, even though he's only in 2 of the stories. She's the Jenny. She's the one that got away. And then in the second story, the titular story, Hearts to Atlantis, once again, she's the one who got away. I can't remember what the main guy's name is. Is it Riley? I can't think what he's called in Hearts in Atlantis, like the main guy who we're following. But she is the one that got away again. And she's mythologized. She's seen through a series of male eyes. And that could quite often be of a reductive thing. It could be a sexist thing. But there's a sense that even though these boys and these men are rendering her poetic, and they're making her more than she is, they're making her an icon, they're making her kind of like the girl that all men have in a cameo ensconced in their heart. We all have one from school, or they're making her that person. But there's a sense, because King's such a gifted writer, that we're not supposed to take their perspective as gospel. And you can kind of see in the gaps between their words who this woman really is, warts and all. And I just think it's wonderful. I love the book and I love the vibe of the book, but I love the way he writes her as at once a poetic myth and also somebody who you can discern in the spaces between the stories. I think she's just marvelous.
Oh, great, Joyce Neal. Awesome. I love that. I love because you're absolutely correct. She has that talismanic quality throughout each story and throughout time. And we follow her as a child into adolescence, into university, where she is sexually active and there is this romantic desire for her. And it's as if we have like a Beverly who got to fully realize adolescence and early adulthood. Great choice. Oh, Carol.
Yeah, and I was so heartbroken. There's a part in the book where you're led to believe that she's died during she becomes basically an activist, like a sort of violent activist. And there's a part where you're led to believe that she may have burned to death, and then you find out she may have not, and my heart soared.
Great one. These are so amazing, Neil. I'm just like, whoa. These are deep. They require scholarship and investigation and close attention. And we love that as an educator. This is like what I do all the time. This is great.
Yeah. Well, my number one is more obvious, I'll be honest. But before I get to it, can I give you some also mentions that I almost picked?
Absolutely.
So, because I had to really think about this, I've been sitting at my computer all day writing names, deleting names. So, some people, characters, when I say love them, maybe don't like them, but love the character work. So, Rose the Hat, up there straight away. Now, I have real issues with Doctor Sleep. I don't think it's a very good book. I know people disagree. I feel it's flawed in several ways, but I love Rose the Hat. She deserved a better book than she got. Some of that, I will admit, is because of my abiding lust for Rebecca Ferguson. Rebecca Ferguson just can do no wrong in my eyes. She's so hot, and her portrayal of Rose the Hat just, did things for me. Margaret White is a truly terrifying villain in the same kind of ilk as Annie Wilkes. I think Margaret White from Carrie is fantastic. Wendy Torrance gets a bad rap because of her portrayal in the movie makes her seem far more passive, far more weak than she is in the book. In the book, she's a kind of a tigress who does whatever she can for her son without ever being superhuman. I think that's what King does really well. He writes women in all of the physical vulnerability and never tries to hide that or get away from that, but then makes them bare their teeth in a way that I have a lot of really strong women in my life, and I recognize that, So I think Wendy gets a bad rap. Julia Shumway from Under the Dome, I love to pieces because I think what King's done in her character is so good, and it's something that feels now so nostalgic. Is she's a Republican who writes for a Democratic newspaper, and she's that fable thing, someone who can disagree with somebody agreeably and not perhaps give in to polarization. That's a book all about polarization. I mean, that book, if he wrote it now, it would just seem like an even more on the money allegory for the world we're living in, but she is the person who can cross the divide, and she's like a common sense every woman. And I think she symbolizes something really healthy in American life. And I just think she's great. King has a certain breed of female character who is a sort of somebody who is beyond the sexualized phase, has not yet become the spinster. He's living in that age of, sort of maybe early 50s where they are very much coming unto themselves and know who they are and take no shit. And I love when King writes those characters because they're often an absolute force to be reckoned with. And I think Julia Shumway's one of those. And here's the weird one. I think one of the greatest and most authentic characters King has ever written is Liz Garfield, Bobby Garfield's mother from Low Men in Yellow Coats from Hearts and Atlantis.
Wow.
Because she's such a flawed human being, and you want to hate her because how much she kind of lets the side in and causes problems. And juxtaposed with the simplicity of Ted Brautigan and Bobby and their righteous mission, she's this compromised, bitter woman, and you want to hate her. And in a lesser story, she'd just be a villain. But I have such empathy for her. And when she goes on that work trip and comes back, and you never quite find out what's gone on, but in your marrow, you know what's happened to her, and it's awful. I think she's a maturely written character that's almost like no one that King has written before. I just think she's one on her own, and she's such a deep cut, you could forget she exists, but I just feel she's so bleakly and bitterly authentic. I think she's marvelous as a creation, not as a person.
Wow. I'm going to sit with that one for a while. That's an amazing choice. And man, Low Men in Yellow Coats is the gift that keeps on giving. It truly is one of the most astonishingly good novellas. And I love how Lord of the Flies is found throughout that novella. And what happens to Liz is soul shattering. It really
it's
is.
awful. Yeah.
I felt the film did a really great job with that as well.
You know, I haven't seen the film. I've never seen it. Don't know why.
Well, I'd love to know your thoughts, but I think you would be pleased.
Okay.
I think that it was a strong adaptation.
Okay. I'll go and watch it. I don't know who plays it, but in my mind it should be Toni Collette, and I don't know why. But my number one is Dolores Claiborne.
Oh,
Because, well, where do you start?
right.
So my kind of analytical, literary, pedagogical hat. My reason is that she is the King's greatest evocation of voice. I don't think he's ever done voice like he did with Dolores Claiborne, because that book is a feat, right? It just
Truly.
just a woman just taught it, but the entire book is a monologue, basically, just a transcribed monologue about really difficult things, written in this vernacular that after a while you don't even realize you're reading vernacular because you're just speaking the language of that island and this woman. And I love the interplay between her and Vera Donovan, this aging wealthy spinster that she's looking after, and who would also be on my list of favorite King women. Their interplay is just magic because even they don't know what they think about each other deep down, because all of the hate, and it is hate, is mixed in with this begrudging love for each other. Or perhaps there's a better word for it that I can't quite think of. Dependence, maybe. You know, what's the word when two animals have a reciprocal relationship? My mind's gone blank.
Oh, mine has too.
Yeah, I can't think. Sorry, it's been a long Sunday, guys. Like the little bird that lives inside the crocodile's mouth, and that kind of relationship, not parasitical, the one that's reciprocal and mutually beneficial. I can't think of the word. Begins with an S. Anyway,
Symbiotic.
symbiotic. Yes, yeah. They live in symbiosis with each other. They depend on each other. They hate each other. They define themselves by each other, and they also, when it really comes down to it, they realize that all of the differences in their lives, poverty and privilege and virtue and sin, all these things that seem to make them complete polar opposites, it's all periphery to the thing they have in common, which that they are both women in a cruel man's world. And that core of them is the same. And that's the core of them that speaks to each other. And when Dolores really needs Vera, Vera understands, even though she's coming from a completely different realm of existence. They are the same at the part that's like the cold, hard heart of who they are is the same. I think it's marvelous. I just think I'm not sure he's written a better book. I mean, I know there are books I love more, but like the craft of Dolores Claiborne is just magnificent. And it's such a shame that it doesn't get talked about more, because to me that book is up there with Cormac McCarthy. You know, it's
Yes.
up there with like a Pulitzer Prize winning novel. And I think that is the kind of book where you do see King's legitimate issues with being pinned as a horror novelist, because if Elizabeth Strout had written Dolores Claiborne, it would be a literary phenomenon,
Right.
you know? But Stephen King wrote it, so it gets put on a certain bookshelf. And I just think that book is given nowhere near the flowers that it deserves. But the other reason that she's my number one favorite is because she reminds me of my grandma.
Oh.
Like, my grandma would absolutely have pushed someone down a fucking well if they touched my mother. Do you know what I mean? Without a moment's hesitation, straight down the well, and would have kept that secret to her dying day. I would not be surprised if my grandmother didn't know where the bodies are buried, honestly. And I just, that kind of indomitable older woman. I remember reading that book at like 15 when it shouldn't have spoken to me at all. I just loved it then, and I love it still. She's by magnitudes too wide to cross. She is my favorite King female.
Oh my gosh, Neil, I might cry about this later, truly. Like it's gonna move me to tears because this is you've shed so much light on an incredibly beautiful King work. You know the power of it, and I don't believe many others do. There's no chapters in this book. It is one monologue, and it is a lady's story who's got a hard hand of cards dealt to her, and she makes the best of it. And when she sees the injustice done to her child, she takes action in the most lioness way possible. It is such an incredible story. Dolores, you're so right. I mean, she really does. I'm just so grateful and proud that you chose her. I just think it's such a thing to celebrate. It really is.
Yeah, she's a force.
Island life, the secrets, the small town life, firstly, that we have, and the inhabitants of small towns, which is a huge thing that King investigates throughout his career, which I adore. And then there's the woman's heart. And what do you do with all of that pain and that resentment when Joe St. George turns out to be an alcoholic abuser in more ways than one, and you can't leave, and you can't even get a credit card on your own? What are you going to do? You are going to hunker down and get into the grit and survive the way that you can. And it's just so admirable. And it's, if we really spend time with Dolores, she is somebody who moves me to tears because she is so incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, she could move me to tears because it's the lack of sentiment. That is an entirely unsentimental book. Well, no, not entirely, because as I say, some final revelations about her and Vera and the secrets they've kept for each other all these years, that verges on sentiment, but it's never saccharine. And their relationship is brutal in a way that you don't often read about two women having a dynamic. We have a lot of men with uneasy détentes or uneasy bonds in fiction. Very rare that you get women with that level of mixed antipathy and love. And it's like I say, even they don't know what they feel for each other. And for a guy to write that, and it always feels weird because here's me, I'm saying for a guy to write that, and I'm a guy, so I'm judging another guy's writing, so we could both be wrong. You know what I mean about the reality of it, but it reads so true to me.
Well said. Well said. I just read this in my Stephen King book club, so this is
all right.
Very serendipitous. So we just finished Dolores Claiborne, and the majority of people in the book club are women. And this novel still soars. Everybody adores Dolores. And we only had one person who thought she could be a criminal mastermind, but only one person. And everybody else was like, we don't care what heinous crimes Dolores has committed because they probably deserved it. This is a righteous woman who works hard, who has lived a hard life, who did not get any breaks. Therefore, we as the reader are going to give her all the breaks forever.
Yeah. No, she's a masterpiece. She's a true masterpiece of a character, of voice and person. And that book should just get more plaudits. It needs to be reconsidered as a modern American classic.
Oh, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more, Neil. Let's recap your beautiful list. I love recaps, as you know, because it's just me by myself. I got to remind the people what I've been blabbing about. So we've got Miss Annie Wilkes, Beverly Marsh, Manda Bunny from Lacey's Story, Carol Gerber, and Dolores Claiborne are Neil's favorites. What a stellar list, Neil. Be proud. Round of applause.
I nearly said Pennywise to be really smart and smug because, at the end it goes like, oh, it was female. It's female. And I thought I could just pick Pennywise, but it seemed too smug.
I do love that. That would have been a good zinger.
Yeah.
Very, very nice. Oh, stunning, beautiful list. We can wiggle our way down to my second question, which of course just builds upon question one. Everything is building upon the foundation we've laid with your favorites. This next one is asking, who in the Stephen King universe that has XX chromosomes, which female do you want more from? Who really grabs at you and you want more of their story?
So I had one knee-jerk reaction to this. Then I had one where I sat down and thought, and I was like, that'd be interesting. So the knee-jerk reaction is Rose the Hat because she's so enigmatic. Like, we know next to nothing about her. She leads the True Knot. And all we know, I believe, is that she was born in Ireland at some point. She emigrated to America at some point. She was living like on the frontier in the 19th century, and she was just known as, is it like Irish Rose or something like that?
Yep.
And then at some point, she becomes the leader of the True Knot, and we don't know anything more. And I would love sort of the Darth Vader story of how she goes from being presumably like somebody quite normal to being somebody who is so entwined with evil. Although I can never quite work out if they are evil, the True Knot, or whether they've just been living a life for so long they've forgotten what the stakes are for the rest of us. I don't know. But either way, there's so much space to be filled there in really interesting periods of history as well. And like you could put it anywhere I interviewed Stephen Graham Jones on my podcast recently about his book, The Buffalo Hunter Hunter. And he said this thing that stuck with me. He said, vampires are time travelers, but they ride an infection rather than a machine.
Ooh.
And I, ever since I've been like, yeah, vampires are the perfect sort of character to give like a long-term view of humanity. And I'd love to see what she's seen in the founding of America, or at least not the founding, but at least the westward expansion. I'd love to see what she's seen, and I could imagine her being somebody who would be rather predisposed against manifest destiny. And I could sort of see him as being somebody who I could imagine a book where she joins with a native tribe in the fight back against these bullies. I could see that being a great book. But then the slow corruption of her by her very particular vampiric needs, I think that would make for a marvelous story.
Oh, it really would. Rose with the natives. Oh, all day, Neil. I would read the hell out of that. This is a tremendous answer because she is so old. There's so much we don't know. She is sexy, but evil. There's a lot of complicated readerly feelings with Rose because we know she's our villain. We know she wants to hurt Danny and Abra, and we don't want her to accomplish that. But at the same time, she's so badass. She's so great. We want to know all that she's seen.
Yeah, I think King had to put that scene where they killed a little boy, arguably the most distressing scene in all of King's fiction. I think he had to put that in there to make her less likable. Otherwise, I just want her to win.
True.
So Rose the Hat I'd see more from. The other one, who's way more niche, and this was prompted by me thinking about how much I don't like Holly Gibney. And that is, here's a weird one. Have you read Big Driver?
Yes.
Full Dark, No Stars?
Yes, sir. Many times.
So I read this and reviewed it years ago when it first came out for like my university magazine, and I was scathing about the story of Big Driver, and in a way that I've completely changed my opinion on, because I found the actual sexual assault so horrible that it felt egregious. It felt like unnecessary. I remember. Well, actually, I won't say the line because it could be quite triggering for people. There's one line I thought, oof, that is not nice, unnecessary. I went back and read the book again, the novella again, and was really impressed by it. I still think it's appalling in the best meaning of that word. But the character of Tess, this woman who goes through this horrendous assault and then is left for dead, drags herself back to civilization and then goes for vengeance. I feel like the story leaves her at a point where it could almost be a prologue for other things to come. It reads like an origin story because it feels like a woman who finishes the story at a jumping off point to go and do other things. So if King had asked me for my opinion about how if he was going to do a procedural, and a series of procedurals, I would have had Tess become a sort of vigilante figure or a sort of, an equalizer type figure who has been through her own trauma, overcome it, and now refuses to look away from that of others. So I would like a book or a series of books about Tess basically just taking down men.
Oh my God, Neil, I love this so much. Great answer. I love Big Driver. I really do, even though it's a hard novella in moments.
Mhm.
It has teeth and they're very sharp, and I love the hell out of it. And I had a theory when I talked about Big Driver a long time ago. If you remember, jump to film with me for a quick second. Tim Burton's
Mhm.
from 1992, Batman Returns. And if you remember, when Selena Kyle's Catwoman, she's thrown out the window by Max Schreck, played
Yeah.
by Christopher Walken, and she lands, she dies. And there's like I call it the hypothetical death. It's the woman who goes back to factory settings, but she's not herself. We're not the woman we were. We are this vengeance seeking Game of Thrones, like Stoneheart, Lady Stoneheart.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
are this creature that is at its factory settings a revenge seeking shell of the former self. And I don't know if it applies, but I always think about that. I always think about that with the character of Tess. She was rebooted to this
Mhm.
animalistic self, and now King sets her on the course for revenge. And I don't know if it'll ever stop. She says, no cops, no one's going to help me. This is on me. I will get justice. I will get blood. And it's amazing. And it's ugly and sad, but also we're cheering for her. We're cheering for
Mhm.
that revenge.
Have you seen the movie Revenge?
Oh, who's in that?
It's a French movie.
Don't think so.
Right. It's by, and once again, my memory lets me down. It's by the same director as the recent movie The Substance.
Oh, okay.
Um, French female director. Her first film, Revenge, is about it does this really interesting thing where it actively inverts the male gaze. So it's a rape revenge fantasy, basically, where this very, very, very attractive woman is who appears to be a bit of a Instagram influencer, for want of a better word, bimbo. Please don't hate listeners. I'm just using like layman's terms for. Anyway, she goes out to the desert with this rich dude who's surrounded by shady individuals, and she's assaulted and left for dead. And she doesn't die. And it's exactly what you're talking about. She kind of resurrects and then goes to war. But she does almost the entire thing incredibly scantily clothed. And the camera knows what it's doing. And it's looking at her in a very sexualized way. But she looks strong rather than skinny and lithe. She looks indomitable. And it's because it's a female director, it's doing all sorts of interesting things with inverting tropes that we've had for too long in these rape revenge movies. But on top of that, it's just a blisteringly bloody, gory fight back movie. And it's exactly so. I recommend going and watching it because it's what it was my favorite horror film of that year when it came out in like 2017. It pulls no punches. But yeah, it's what we're both talking about. Like you say, back to factory settings. I think it was as a resurrection. They've essentially died. They've left the carapace of who they were on the floor, and this hunched, like muscular knuckle of a person stands up and goes for vengeance. And I feel like Tess has got all of that, but she's also got this like calculating brain where she's a little bit cooler and a little bit colder and willing to plan. So I think you could get novels out of it where she was actually in a sort of Dolan's Cadillac sort of way,
Ooh,
where
nice.
she's actually, rather than just going in all guns blazing, you could see her like destroying lives through this like slow, calculated neo-noir approach. And I think it'd make a great book or a great series, but that's just me.
Oh my goodness. I will watch Revenge
Mhm.
immediately. Oh my
It's not
goodness.
an easy watch, but it's very good.
Good to know. Oh, stellar choice, Neil. So good, so good. These make me so happy. I'm so full of joy. I can't contain all the joy in my body listening to you say these amazing deep cuts in the King universe. I feel it's going to be so nourishing to the constant reader community out there who we know these stories, we read them, but then you pull them out in this new spotlight, and it's such an electrifying feeling. I'm so excited. I'm way too happy, way too cheery, too much joy.
You're too kind, Kim. You're always too kind to guests on this show. You should be a bit more demanding. Like, be less nice to people.
It's my inner educator. I'm always around writers.
I always feel nourished. I feel nourished. I feel like you're getting the best of it, but you're buttering me up. No one in my life is this nice to me.
I'm glad. I've heard this. I know I'm a little too nice, but I love it. It's like I feel I shine bright. I know this about myself. I'm a bright light. So I might as well share it.
Shine away. Shine away. The world's a dark place. Shine on. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I'm just always around students. And so I'm like, go forth, soar, fly. So it's hard to turn off on the weekends. All right, good sir. We have Rose the Hat and Tess. I forget her last name, but Tess from Big Driver. Two lovely females, incredibly powerful females who Neil would like more of.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. A Rose the Hat novel, Tess sequels. Oh man, what an amazing series those would be. My third question is, let's get down into the grit of King's writing career. And I know that you've touched on this a little bit, but let's look at King's coverage of women. We mentioned Susan Norton from Salem's Lot, who she's a little bit of a paper doll. We like her, but there's just not a lot of development. And then I think a lot of them are pretty underbaked until we get to the 90s. Mm-hmm. The Eclipse trilogy or the Eclipse duo, where we've got Jessie Burlingame, Dolores Claiborne, Rosie McClendon Daniels, and then we get a big shift in the writing career of King and how he focuses on women. I wanted to ask your thoughts of King's coverage of women and how you feel it develop. And yeah, let's open that one up.
So when I used to work in academia, I used to work in a Gothic sort of department. Everyone was working on something Gothic. And there was a lot of hate for King. And there was a lot of hate for King for two reasons. One, people thought it was a pot boiler. Everyone wanted to be, highfalutin. This is why I left academia. And a lot of female readers would write things about how poor King was at writing women. And I have never understood it. But I am also very aware that I'm a guy. And it's really not for me to mansplain to women why they're wrong about female characters. You know what I mean? So I am aware of that. But my I'm still allowed a reaction, still allowed an opinion. And my reaction is, I don't see how you can look at King's career and think he can't write women. He gets it wrong a lot. But I think most male writers get it wrong a lot. And I think when he gets it right, he gets it so beautifully right that it, counts for a lot. And you are right, the paper doll thing, Susan Norton, etc. But we all forget that he started with Carrie, which is one of the most insightful books about young womanhood I've ever read. I mean, it's 50 years old now. I wrote a thing for Esquire about it being 50 years old, and I got some writers to comment. I spoke to Margaret Atwood about it. I spoke to some more contemporary authors about it and how it transcends and how the things that were true then are still true now, about the way that women are played off against each other, about the way that beauty is used as a weapon to bludgeon women with, about how toxic men can create all kinds of damage amongst women with certain degrees of vulnerability to those kinds of men. You can see it even now, in contemporary misogyny. I think Carrie is an incredibly effective book for a first novel, written by a 20-something-year-old man writing about women who were, a few years younger than him. It's almost unbelievable that he pulled that off, and it stands. But then he sort of stopped making that effort with his female characters for a while. Susan Norton, I think, is the most egregious example of somebody who is just like the absolute. I mean, she's kind of, she has certain strengths, but they're never given enough leg room. She's never go to sprint in that book. She's always held back by, and to be fair, some of that is because he is writing Dracula in America, and there are certain limitations that come with, transposing Dracula to America. Because there's only so much you can do with Mina Harker and Lucy Westenra, because they're always unavoidably damsels surrounded by the group of men who want to take care of them. So there are inbuilt limitations. I get that. But like you say, it's not till the 90s that it felt like he made self-improvement with women a project. And what I've always found really striking is that he tackled it in the most ballsy way possible. Because if you think about Dolores Claiborne and Gerald's Game, he didn't just go, right, I'm going to write some stories about women. He went, right, I'm going to write some really technically demanding stories about women where I'm going to really box myself in. Like in Dolores Claiborne, he's boxed in by form, by this chapterless, rushing monologue that never has a chance to breathe. You know, like that is a technical feat. And in Gerald's game, of course, you're stuck not just in a bedroom, but in a bed, you know, and inside the mind of Jesse. So, like, the technical demands of those novels would be challenging enough if he wasn't also trying to go, right, let's experiment with how I can write the female mind. And I think it's incredibly laudable what he pulled off. I think it's marvelous. And he's carried on. I mean, we've talked about so many characters today that, you know, from the, let's call it, if not the second half of his career, then the last 2/5 of his career. And I feel like now you don't get any of that criticism anymore about how King writes women. I think a lot of that is unfairly loaded to the writer he was when he was in his 20s and early 30s, when, let's face it, I only now know enough. I've been married like 6 years. I just about now know enough to feel like I could try and write a female protagonist. You know, men are stupid. We don't know how women work. If we did, we'd treat them better and wouldn't be such arseholes. You know, we have to mature. And I think it's not King's fault he was so productive when he was so young, you know? But yeah.
I love that, Neil. So, so good. I wanted a little bit of your help with a question. This is like a little extra portion of this question because I was recently chatting with Matt and Scott from Kingslingers, and they now have the Flanagan's Wake pod. It is so delightful. I love those two so much. They are the most wonderful gentlemen. We had a great time. So we just talked about Gerald's Game because I recently read it for the very first time. Blew me away. And I'm still sort of emotionally processing how that book made me feel. And Scott asked me, which I don't feel I answered this question as well as I could have because I was very nervous and overly excited. So I don't think I answered it, but he asked, would a woman have wrote Gerald's Game or other novels where King is really shining with writing the feminine? Would they have done it any differently? And I know that you read a lot of horror across the spectrum. And so based on what you observe, and this is not to minimize or limit gender writing in any way or put a label on anything, but do you feel a woman could write something like Gerald's Game or Dolores or Rose Madder any differently? Or are we really getting into 360 human character development?
That's an interesting question. And I'm not sure that I know enough to know what the things are that King got wrong. Or, you know, the one thing I do think so let me name some female authors. One, because I think people should go and read them if they haven't already, who are really, really making strides. So my good friend Gemma Amor writes phenomenal, complex, unlikable women who you still root for. You know, that awful thing about unlikable female protagonists. I'm not getting into that, it's bullshit, but Gemma nails it. CJ Lead, who wrote a novel called Mayfly, which is a kind of gender flipped American Psycho about just a bloodthirsty woman on the rampage in LA. Personally, my favorite female author currently working is a friend of mine again called Rachel Harrison, who writes, I think Rachel Harrison writes the angst of the late millennial woman better than anything I've read. I think her books, the Return, Such Sharp Teeth, So Thirsty, she tends to take genre tropes and then do something really interesting with them from a feminist perspective. If they were to write Gerald's Game, the thing I think they would have done differently is I think they would have gone harder on the abuse.
Okay.
And I think there's perhaps an element that King felt icky.
Yeah.
And it's an element that I sympathize with, because if I was to write that book, I would be so uncomfortable depicting the awful reality of child sexual abuse. It just feels like territory that I'd be so frightened I was writing it for the wrong reason, writing it to shock. And I think that it's valid to write about the most atrocious things, but I think when you're dealing with something like that, it shouldn't be used as a shock tactic. And I think perhaps King was hesitant, maybe. And I think he handles it beautifully. The whole thing was like she's bouncing on her dad's knee. and it's like freighted with dramatic irony. We know what's going on, but she's sort of working it out in the moment, and it's horrible. And the subtlety really elevates it, I think, in a different direction. But I think a woman, and in particular the three women that I've mentioned, would have been able to go for the throat much more and felt much more valid in going for the throat and really disgusting the reader and making the reader feel unclean, you know. I think, but I mean, I don't want to speak for them. They may not, but I could imagine that's what they'd be able to do that perhaps a male writer wouldn't want to for the right reasons.
I think you're right. I have heard so many great things about Miss Harrison, and I really want to put her at the top of my to be read. It's time. It's time.
She's writing a new book that's out this autumn, and I've read half of an early copy. It's called Play Nice, and it is the haunted house, demonic possession, Amityville horror on steroids novel that we've needed for a while. It's out in September, I think, and it's going to set the horror world alight.
Sold. I am a gothic girl. I love a haunted house. That's my jam. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Oh, this is so cool. This is so good. My brain is just, all these doors are opening when I talk to Neil. I feel like I can't think quickly enough. One of my favorite things that I enjoy about King writing women, I enjoy when King writes about menstruation and writes about the female body. I think I appreciate any male author who goes there because it's difficult. You don't know what it's like. And so I always tip my hat and commend anybody who is exploring the female body, childbirth, menstruation, all of these things that are quintessentially female. I love that. And we have it in Carrie. He kicked off his career talking about menstruation. We have it in Tommyknockers, if you remember. Granted, Bobby Anderson's crazy menstruation is from the alien craft, but he didn't have to add that. He didn't have to go there. And I like when King is unafraid to go there. And it is part of horror. It's body horror in a way. This is not a fun thing. It's a frightening thing at times, but I just love it. And so I really enjoy that in Gerald's Game. It is so visceral, but a female writer probably would have gone harder. And so it's nice that, okay, well, it's welcome. It's welcome. The gross and the sad and the graphic, he's in good company.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that going harder would have made it a better book. Because like I say, the way he writes it, the subtlety with which that scene plays out is horrifying in its own quiet way. So I'm not saying he should have done anything different, quite the opposite. I just think there is a reclamation of sexual vulnerability by female writers that should remain the province of female writers. Yeah, I think to never say never, but I don't think a man is ever going to write a scene of sexual misbehavior from a female perspective as well as a woman can. So I think, therefore, probably, unless you absolutely have to, don't tiptoe into those waters. No, I'm going too far, though, because I would never, ever be censorious and say what people should and should not write. I think, as with all things, it should be just write with responsibility. And I think King made the right choice in Gerald's Game. I think if he'd gone way worse, it would have been a much poorer book for it. That's I suppose what I'm saying. It's a backhanded compliment, I guess. Because I'm now thinking books. I think like one of my favorite King books is Bag of Bones. Ooh. I think it's a beautiful, but the scene in that I'm not going to get into because it's too disgusting. Like, I didn't need that scene, and I'm glad he didn't give us that scene or some version of it in Gerald's Game, Oh
my God, Neil, I'm really glad you bring this up because Bag of Bones traumatized me. Full on, I am not okay. I have never recovered from it. It's the darkest thing that I've ever read from King, ever. Mm-hmm. But it's so wild. It's written so well, but it's the human horror that cut me very deeply.
Yeah.
And so I've only read Bag of Bones once, but I will read it again this year because I would like to make peace with it. But I agree. I do think he went too far with that. And that's hard to say. And I'm just speaking from a wounded emotional center because I don't like the depths it dragged me down to of human evil and what happened to Sarah. So I say that it's difficult for me to articulate how I think he should have changed it. And I think it should have been lessened. But for you to echo that helps.
Yeah.
This might have been a little too damn far.
It's the fact that she's a woman of color who it
Yes.
happens to. It feels like a real punching down onto someone who it didn't require that level of depravity. It's a haunting ghost story, and it felt like that was ported in from another book written by a different writer. And for a moment, it takes me out of the book. And it's a shame that it remains the thing that I remember the most about the book because there's so much good stuff in that book. I nearly made Jo Noonan one of my picks for favorite female characters, even though she only kind of exists as an ephemeral, spectral influence. She's such a force for justice in that book that I think she's marvelous, you know. But the whole thing with Sarah Tidwell is, yeah, it's tough. I've read worse things in other books by other writers that haven't shocked me as much, and I think it's because I didn't expect it from him in that book.
This is very comforting. It's actually quite
Mm,
nice to talk about this with you, Neil,
yeah.
because it was such a painful, horrific thing.
Mm,
And it's nice to hear from others who are observing the same thing, like, whoa, 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 whoa,
yeah.
whoa. This is a
Yeah.
lot. And yeah, I do think it hurt the novel as a whole for me because of that scene. And I wish I really do wish it wasn't there because Bag of Bones is extraordinary. What an amazing gothic story. I love Darkscore Lake. I'm a huge fan. I think there's so much working.
I love Rojette, the evil old,
Yeah.
like what a villain she is. Like, yeah,
Yes, and
yeah.
Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca is probably one of my all-time favorites. And he was channeling that for Bag of Bones, which I adore. And then we get this. I've said this a couple times when I force myself to talk about Bag of Bones. I feel like I witnessed a crime,
Mm.
Neil. I feel so powerless in reading that scene. Like I really feel like I'm witnessing a crime and I'm silenced and it feels too real. It feels too real,
Yeah.
too awful.
It feels like a scene from Toni Morrison's Beloved. That's what
Yes.
I always think it feels. But in Toni Morrison's Beloved, because of it's Toni Morrison, you feel like you kind of gird yourself in that book and you're like, okay, I'm in safe hands here because of who's writing it.
Right.
Whereas in Bag of Bones, it felt smuggled in. I was going to say for the wrong reasons, but I don't think King would ever write anything like that for the wrong reasons. I think he just, personally, from my perspective, made a mistake. I don't think there's any ill intent behind the scene. I don't think it's any kind of marker of any kind of bigotry on his behalf or anything like that at all. I really don't. I just feel like he lost sight of what the book was that he was writing. And we already knew that Sarah Tidwell's history was dark enough without seeing it's written so large on the page, you know? Anyway.
Absolutely. I appreciate your thoughts. It actually is, it's very comforting. It really is, because I am trying to make peace with it. I'm trying to
Yeah.
get over and get through it. I'm not there yet. So it is
Yeah.
nice to, I think a full reread will help me do that. And that is probably coming up later on this year. But I appreciate hearing from someone else on the scene that, like, yeah, wait a damn minute. This
Mm.
is
And it really highlights the subtlety with which he approached Gerald's game. Because it shows that they were written not that far apart. Was it 98 Bag of Bones? But
correct.
like 5 years later. So you see like the restraint that King knows when to show really works. Because he's not a restrained author, he's a maximalist. Everything is like everything. He gives us everything is writ large. Like he's not a restrained writer. And in Gerald's game, everything is restrained. The setting, the levels of depravity, everything's pared down and it's just perfectly pitched. So, yeah.
Oh, well said. Well said, Neil. This is so rich and wonderful. All right, we can trickle down to question number 4, which I've always wanted Neil to answer. I don't know what happened, Neil. I was probably just overly excited when we had our constant reader interview, and I think there were just questions I forgot to ask you.
It's more that I talk too much.
I don't know, because I love your thoughts on everything. But one of my favorite little endearing mysteries in the Stephen King catalog is the fate of Charli McGee from 1980's Firestarter. She is 9 years old when the novel ends. What happened to Miss Charlie? So over the years, I have enjoyed this question, asking writers, asking creatives, if you had King's blessing, where would you take this character? She's 9 when the novel ends, and that's still very young. And what would you do with this fire goddess? What would you do with this little girl?
So I listened to your interview with Calvin Ellis, who's a friend of mine. What a fantastic interview, by the way. Like, that moved me to tears when he was talking about his little brother, and like when he was, hello, Calvin, if you're listening. And he gave the best answer. He gave like a fully fleshed out, brilliant answer. So
Truly.
I feel under some pressure. So I've been sitting in my garden today thinking, and I'm not very good at coming up with ideas under pressure. They tend to just come to me unbidden. But I've been thinking, and here's what I would do. So it's been a minute since I've read Firestarter, probably about 10 years. So I may not remember all that much, but I do seem to remember that the shop who are giving people, is it lot 6, the thing that makes them
Correct. Yep.
into what they are? I seem to remember there being some reference to another facility in Maui in Hawaii, which seems a strange detail. That got me thinking it anyway. So we know there are probably other facilities other than the one that Charlie, wreaked havoc upon. So the shop probably hasn't stopped. And in fact, we know it hasn't because it pops up in other books later on here and there, right? So here's what I'm thinking. Charlie has gone off. Charlie is living a life of, an anonymity somewhere in the Midwest, probably. Like, I imagine her on a farm. I imagine living a very quiet life. I imagine she's met a man who has died. And I was thinking, would he have died in some way as a consequence of her gift that she can't control? I don't know. But her fellow has died, and she's been left with a child. Doesn't matter if the child is a boy or a girl. I haven't got that far. I just see a shape, right? I don't know if it's a boy or a girl. And through various means, I haven't thought of all the details here. I've got one big idea to get to. The rest is just me kind of going, fill in space later. So through various means, they find out the shop is still to this day testing people and have been ever since. And one of the things they're doing is they're trying to create beam breakers.
Oh my God.
In the way that Dinky Earnshaw... Right, where are you in the Dark Tower?
I just finished Wolves of the Calla, so I'm on Song of Susanna, but I have read Everything's Eventual, so I do know about Dinky.
Right, okay, so fine, right. And have you read Black House?
No, not yet. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm trying to spoil things for you. Okay. So beam breakers are a thing in the world of the Dark Tower, right? So the shop have got involved with the Cantoi. They're linked together with, the Crimson King and all that. I won't spoil too much for you, Kim.
Okay.
And they're trying to build beam breakers. And in my story, one of the things that they have created in this... Oh, and it matters as well for characterization that there are people living in this facility who have all ages. They've got children, but also I'd have one character there who's been there for like 50 years and he's basically just institutionalized and broken. I mean, quite a tragic character, some old woman who has just been, she's just destroyed, right? A bit of an Amanda Bunny type character. Anyway, one of the things that's come out of this in a sort of Vecna Stranger Things style vibe is a character, a particularly gifted shop protege who is able to create ruptures into the Toadash darkness. The Toadash darkness, for those who don't know, is the dark nothing void that exists between planes of existence of the tower. So it's like the macroverse where it lives. Like this, it's the jaunt. It's where the monsters from the mist come through from. It's this space in between realities of the tower. And one of these kids at the shop has inadvertently tapped into the power to rip holes and let the Toadash darkness through. And again, fill in blanks. I don't know why, but Charlie and her child, who has never shown powers, but I would hint at this child having certain powers, would hold back what the power is. They help people escape from the shop. I don't know why. I haven't had a chance to think. They're in Maui. They've helped people escape. And they become aware of this boy, this man-child, this teenage boy who can rip these holes in the world. And they're hunting him down. And all I know is I have this final scene where this crew of people, this ragtag group of characters who are all they're kind of like broken X-Men, I suppose. I love ragtag groups of characters. They all end up being sucked into the Toadash darkness, which is a place we've never explored in King's universe. they go into it, and it's full. We know it's full of monsters, and they're in there. And this is where the kicker comes in. Charlie obviously uses her Firestarter powers to fight and stuff like this, but we realize they're in complete, unassailable, impossible darkness. There is no light in this dimension. That's when we find out that Charlie's child can't start fires, but he can create light.
Oh my
And
God.
he's able to light up the Tadash darkness, right? And here's my kicker, because nothing says King like a grand metaphysical swing for the bleachers. I would have it that this child creates light in the Tadash darkness and therefore becomes a version of our God. Because God, on the first day, God created light. And I would have it that this is how universes begin. And thus a new pocket universe begins in the Tadash darkness. And you could tie it in with the... I'd have to really think about the metaphysics of the tower and how the tower works. But you could make it, you could link, and I need to think more about this, but you could link it some way. So that's what my medication-addled brain came up with today in my back garden.
Neil, I have no words. My mouth is just open, and that is incredible. That is incredible. So good. Oh my God, that's huge. You'd have a zillion sequels if you wanted, but that is so huge. He's the light bearer. Ah! Oh my God. Charlie's son would be the light bearer.
Yeah.
The deity, oh my God, a new universe, a new world. I can't even.
Yeah, that's my idea. Probably need some refinement.
Mic drop, Neil. Oh my goodness. I think King would sign off on that. It's so huge. It's so grand. It's so great.
Thank you. If only my actual ideas for books were that good, right? If only one I could actually sit down and write was anywhere near that good. Yeah.
Oh, preach. I'm with you there. Well, Neil, all my questions are answered, but any final thoughts that you want to have about the women of Stephen King that you want to put forth to everybody out there?
Keep reading them, basically, and because he's better than he's given credit for.
Yes.
And I would say most of his most memorable characters are female.
Yes.
I think King's everymen are great. You know, the Stews of this world, the Larry Underwood. I mean, Larry Underwood is my favorite King character of all time. But I think the ones that really stick in the memory tend to be the women. And that's got to be a good thing. And here's another thing I'll say. I've never heard anyone else make this point. I don't know why it's not obvious, but when King writes about women, he really means it because he tends to name the book after her. Carrie, Dolores Claiborne, Holly, Lisa's story.
Yeah.
So like he writes with a real intent about his women, and that's to be commended.
Oh, so beautifully said. So extraordinary, Neil. It's always such a challenge to emotionally compose myself after hearing you talk about King because it is so nourishing and it opens up so many doors in my heart to why I love Stephen King's writing, but I love the community. And you are a pillar in this community that gives so much with your insight and with your perspective. And I'm just so immensely grateful to you. Thanks for being who you are. Thanks for loving King and celebrating fiction authors.
Well, that's doing what you do, because it's always my most delightful listen of the week, because you are quite literally the happiest person I know. So please keep bringing it, because it helps.
I appreciate that so much, because I often, as we all have the imposter syndrome and crippling self-doubt, I think to myself how I'm just this sunny little unicorn at the horror show. And I don't know if I fit in here, because I like horror a lot, but I don't know if I would call myself a horror girly, and I feel like I'm very different from a lot of King fans out there. And then I get a swell of confidence and think to myself, no, I'm here because I love writing. I'm here because I love fiction, and I'm celebrating the master of it, and I'm celebrating the stories and the characters that give people joy. And I think I belong. I think I have a spot at the party and a seat at the table.
There are far too many deeply obnoxious wannabe gatekeepers who are all men. There are far too many of them for people like you to start gatekeeping yourself. So Just don't do that at all. Yeah, no, you're great. I love your show. I always say yours is my favorite Stephen King show. So, and I mean it. So please keep making it. And congrats on 5 years as well.
Oh, thank you, Neil.
Well, you are, not to leave on a sour note, but at some point we're going to have words about Wizard and Glass because an also mention in your top 15 is simply not good enough.
I know. You're so right. I knew that was a huge faux pas the second I said
Yeah.
it. But my motivation behind that was like, okay, I'm going to rate the tower on its own thing. And I think if I did that, Wizard would be number one. Wizard would be number one. It is the most beautiful, touching Western love story. I treasure Susan. I love She-Me. I am moved forever by Wizard and Glass. So it would most likely be number one out of the Tower novels. So there is that.
Oh, and can I just plug before I go? Can I just tell people about my Dark Tower thing I meant to do at the start when you asked about how the year was going?
Absolutely, Neil. I want a full Talking Scared boilerplate. Tell us all the things.
So, yeah, I speak to horror writers every week and stuff, but I'm also doing a step-by-step guide to Stephen King's Dark Tower. So it's me, it's Nat Cassidy of this parish. Nat forgets more in a morning than I know about King, full stop, you know. And King called his book out recently on top, which was lovely to see.
Wasn't that wonderful?
Much deserved. When the Wolf Comes Home, Nat's new book, true masterpiece. Anyway, but Nat and I and our friend Chris Panatia. Now, Chris has never read any King.
Oh my
So he's
God.
not just coming to the Tower for the first time, he's coming to King for the first time. We're doing it book by book, but we're not just doing the 8 Tower books. We're doing all of the books that are intimately connected. So we're doing The Stand this summer. We're doing Salem's Lot for reasons I won't go into unless you've got that far. We'll probably do Everything's Eventual, Hearts and Atlantis, Black House, Talisman, and the main books. An episode comes out every sort of 2 to 3 months so that people have got time to read, because we don't spoil anything beyond the book we are currently reading, because Chris doesn't know what's coming, but he's terrifyingly prescient about what is coming. But he doesn't know, so you can kind of read along with it, and we talk for hours, and it's a lot of fun, and people seem to like it. So the first 2 episodes are already out. The Gunslinger was back in January. We did Drawing of the Three about a month ago, and The Wastelands is coming in early June. So yeah, go find it. Talking Scared wherever you get podcasts.
Oh my goodness. I am such a fan. It's so joyful listening to Chris absorb what's happening. It's a real delight. And you and Nat are the best duo. You are the Wireman and Edgar.
I'll take that. Yeah. He is my wireman. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I am actually going to see Nat next week because he's coming home to kick off When the Wolf Comes Home.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we are from the same town. When he lived here, we did not live very far apart. And so he's coming home to the desert, and I'm going to try and get Nat to sign all my things.
Oh, cool.
Pass along my greetings.
Yeah, say hello from me. Yeah.
You and Nat are Edgar and Wireman. Keep on keeping on. We all love it.
Yeah, he's good fun. He's a good guy.
Do you want to talk about Good Boy at all, good sir?
Oh, well, I didn't want to impose. Yes, please. Yeah, so I have my first. Right, I'll tell you something that I haven't told anybody. I may regret this because this may make me cringe. I may cringe about this once I've done it. So, I have my first novella coming out this October. It comes out on my birthday, October 9th. So my debut book comes out on my birthday. It's part of a series of like novellas called I'll start again. It's part of a series of novellas called the Northern Weird Project. So a great publisher in the UK called Wild Hunt Books are trying to showcase Northern writers by getting 6 of us to write weird little stories set in our part of the north of England. And I'm in Lancashire, which is just outside Manchester. It's all kind of moorland and very, hard worked quarry land and stuff like that. And I've written this story that is basically my attempt to transpose it to a small English town where I grew up, essentially. It's only a novella, though, so it's nowhere near as expansive, but it's basically about a town that is haunted by a certain threat, and the only thing that can stand against this horror is a tiny little dog that is based upon my dog, Ted, who is the apple of my eye. And I got them to put my actual dog on the cover. So if you see the cover on my social media, Talk Scared Pod, that's everywhere on social media. The cover is really nice, beautiful, dark blue, and there's a dog on it, and that is my actual dog. And that's how it on my birthday. And please pre-order now. You can. It's ebook and paperback worldwide, etc. Much appreciated if you can. But here's the thing, I'll tell you. It seems the place to say this. I haven't said this publicly. I emailed it to Stephen King.
Oh my God.
And I expected nothing. And out of nowhere, I just got an email from him that just said, like, I think I won't do the entire thing. Just said, it's an excellent story. He talked about how much he liked it and why he liked it. And then he signed off with, you might have a future in this business, son. And I haven't come off the ceiling since.
Neil, congratulations. Oh my God. Neil, this is no words. No words.
Yeah. I was trying to keep it quiet because it was a personal correspondence. I thought, I don't want to, you get some people who really like, leverage any kind of nod from King. And I try and be cool with the dude because we speak a little bit now and again. And I'm very aware that I'm that guy. And I don't want to be that guy, So I try and be cool. But this seems a place to actually say that happened. And it's insane that I started a podcast 5 years ago in my spare time. And now Stephen King has read my little novella. And it just feels like an insane journey. So, yeah, happy to tell you.
Oh, I'm honored and well-deserved, sir. I'm so thrilled and pleased for you. What a beautiful full circle. Oh, what an amazing thing, Neil. I share in that joy with you. I think you're very self-aware and your Britishness keeps you very humble. I think you're doing great.
I'll try because I don't want to be Annie Wilkes, you know what I mean? So, or Mort Rainey. I don't want to be that dude.
We all have to keep ourselves in check. We all have to turn down the Annie dial. We do. Yeah. I think we do a great job. I think I always tell the super fans and my students, I'm like, don't be an apologist for the text. We have to go with what the text says. We can't say, I think, no. That's how we prevent Annie from coming out.
Yeah.
Well, Neil, this has been such a tremendous gift. You have sent this topic, the women of Stephen King, which is very near and dear to my heart. You've just sent it into the stratosphere, and I can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Total pleasure. Everybody knows where to find Talking Scared. They're already fans, as am I, and I am adoring the Dark Tower coverage. So excited for this stand. I did not know that was coming. I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm making Chris read a 1,300-page book just for a bit of fun. Yeah.
Worth it. Obsessed. I just finished it for the first time a couple months ago, and I'm still there. I'm still with Tom and Nick. I'm still in New Vegas. I'm still there. So I'm thrilled to revisit it with Talking Scared.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it again.
Thank you so much, Neil.
Thank you. Anytime.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Oh, wow, everybody. Huge thank yous to Mr. Neil McRobert for joining us and really helping us level up in terms of what's possible with Stephen King scholarship. My goodness, guys, I'm just so honored and grateful to be able to chat with one of the coolest guys out there about the coolest writer out there. Oh gosh, I'm just shaking my head right now. Sometimes my little heart can't take all the joy. Unfortunately, as I was putting this episode together, I learned the very sad and tragic news that Neil's father passed away. Although I did not have the privilege of ever meeting Mr. Robert McRobert, that has to be the best name ever, I really am honored to know about his charming and cheeky shenanigans from Neil's show, and to also know his son Neil, who is warm, kind, brilliant, hilarious, and who I have no doubt is the very best of him. And coincidentally, on this American Memorial Day holiday, I'd like to send my heartfelt condolences to Neil and his family. Mr. Neil McRobert, I hope at this time you're encircled by friends, and most importantly, when you're not physically surrounded by loved ones and loving doggies, when you're alone and it's quiet, and maybe there isn't the comfort of birdsong or the sound of the wind, I hope you are showered in peace and warmth and happy memories. And I know I'm speaking for many out there to say, we mourn with you, we're thinking of you, and hope the days ahead are filled with more joy than sorrow. Big, big hugs to you, my friend. I have to stop before I lose my composure, because peripheral loss is a challenging thing, especially when you have a heart as tender as mine. But I'd like this wonderful episode to be dedicated to the loving memory of Mr. Bob McRobert, father of Neil McRobert, who will be greatly missed. Oh, that's all I got, everybody. Gotta keep it together, gotta be strong. If any of you out there listening would like some additional commentary on the women of Stephen King, please head to my Patreon, The Dance Macabre with Kim C., which is an extension of this podcast filled with additional content exploring Stephen King film adaptations, Stephen King short stories, and Stephen King females. So please head to The Dance Macabre with Kim C. at patreon.com/dancewithkimc. That's dance with an S. If you haven't done so already, feel free to say hello on any of the socials or reach out to me at underratedsk@gmail.com, as I'd love to hear from you. King fans are my specialty. I'll be back soon with hopefully some coverage on the brand new Stephen King novel, Never Flinch. I'm gonna dive in straight away with everyone, and I'm really looking forward to it. What a wonderful time it is when there's a brand new Stephen King novel. Take care, and thank you all so very much for listening.